I am 26 years old. I was baptized at 13. I was married at 18. I have been out of the organization 4 months, and I live alone now in Columbus, Ohio. There is a story I have not told yet, and it is the one I want to tell you tonight. It is the story of what happened when I begged the elders for a therapist. I want you to understand what really lives behind the closed doors of a Jehovah's Witness marriage. I want you to know what the men who are supposed to be your shepherds actually say when a young wife tells them she cannot sleep, cannot eat, cannot stop crying in the basement laundry room with the dryer running so her husband does not hear her. They do not say, "Go see someone." They do not say, "Find help." They open the New World Translation. They quote Ephesians 5 and 1 Peter 3. They tell you the depression is a fruit of weak spirituality. They tell you to read more, pray more, attend more meetings, submit more completely to your husband as your head. They prescribe headship as the cure. There is a phrase Brother Kessler used with me, almost casually, that took me years to understand was not care. It was containment. Stay with me through this one. If anything I am about to say sounds familiar, if you grew up in a house where your sadness was a sin and your silence was a virtue, I want you in the room with me while I tell it. Subscribe so the next woman who needs to hear this finds it. Leave a comment, even one sentence, so the women still inside know they are not the only ones. Your voice in the comments is somebody else's hand on a railing. That is the only reason I ask. The first time I asked for help, I was 23 years old, and I was holding a small blue, palm-sized notebook that did not belong to me. I had found it that morning in the top drawer of Daniel's nightstand, underneath his copy of The Shepherd, the Flock of God Elders Manual. I was not snooping. I was looking for a Tylenol. He kept the bottle there because he did not like medicine cabinets. He said they accumulated worldly pharmaceuticals. So the Tylenol went in the drawer with the manual and the cheap ballpoint pens and this notebook I had never seen before. I opened it. I sat down on the edge of the bed in our first apartment in Mansfield, the apartment with the beige walls and the framed Proverbs 3 plaque over the couch, and I read every page. It was a log. My husband, Daniel Hoffman, 22 when I married him, a ministerial servant being groomed for elder, considered exemplary in the Mansfield North congregation, had been keeping a log of my menstrual cycle in cheap ballpoint columns. Dated entries, ... for the days of bleeding. A separate column for the nights we had been intimate. A third column with letter codes I could not parse at first, until I realized they were a private rating system. S for submissive, R for resistant, Q for quiet, Q+ when I had cried. He had been keeping it for almost a year. I sat there with the notebook in my lap and the Tylenol bottle in my other hand, and I understood, the way you understand a sentence in a language you almost know, that I was being managed. That was the morning the depression started. Or rather, that was the morning I noticed it had been there for months, sitting underneath every meal, every family worship night at 7 sharp, every Saturday field service in the Kingdom Hall parking lot with the paper coffee cup going cold in my hand. I had been submissive. I had been quiet. I had been a Q in his column, and it had not made anything better. The marriage was still the marriage. Underneath all of it, I had stopped wanting anything. I had stopped wanting breakfast. I had stopped wanting to call my mother. I had stopped wanting to pick up the phone at all. I told Daniel about a month later that I needed to see somebody. I did not say therapist. I knew better than to say that word in our house. I said I needed to talk to somebody. Anybody. A doctor, maybe. A woman, maybe. He looked at me across the kitchen table, where we ate every dinner at 6:23 because Daniel said dinner before 6 was rushed and after 6:30 was undisciplined, and he said, "This is a spiritual problem, sister. The world cannot fix what only Jehovah can fix. We will speak to the elders. There is a sister I used to sit next to at the Kingdom Hall, her name does not matter, who would sometimes look over at me during the kingdom songs and reach for my elbow. I have wondered for 4 months now what she actually saw in those weeks before the elders came. 3 nights later, 2 of them stood on my doormat. Brother Thompson, 68, presiding overseer, soft-spoken, paternal. Brother Kessler, 47, Daniel's best friend, the man who would later sit on my judicial committee and not recuse himself. 7:14 on a Tuesday. I will never forget the exact minute, because the digital clock on the microwave was right behind Brother Thompson's left shoulder when I opened the door. They had not called ahead. They had not needed to. 2 pairs of identical Rockport Oxfords lined up on the doormat, one a size 10, one a size 11. They sat on our couch. I sat on the folding chair Daniel pulled in from the laundry room because we only had 2 seats in the living room, and Daniel took the armchair. Brother Thompson opened a New World Translation on the coffee table. He read me Proverbs 3, verses 5 and 6. Trust in Jehovah with all your heart. Do not lean on your own understanding. Then he closed the Bible, set it on his thigh, and asked me whether I had been keeping up with my personal study, whether I had been preparing for the meetings, whether I had been submitting to my husband as my headship arrangement required, whether I had any unresolved sin that might be obstructing my joy. Nobody asked whether I was sleeping. Nobody asked whether I was eating. Nobody asked what I was actually feeling. The diagnostic was scriptural. The diagnostic was always scriptural. I want to step back for a minute and tell you what was actually happening in that living room. Because I did not understand it then, and I want anyone watching to understand it now, the way I had to learn it from a secular trauma-informed therapist in Columbus, the way I had to learn it from the books I have read in 4 months. What was happening in that living room was not pastoral care. It was a clinical containment protocol dressed up as scripture. 2 appointed men, 1 psychologue in a nightstand drawer, 1 young wife on a folding chair, and a doctrine designed in Warwick that explains every human struggle as a deficit of obedience. None of it was personal. All of it was procedural. Inside the Watchtower system, mental illness in a young sister is treated as a symptom of spiritual deficiency, not a separate medical category, not an organic condition with a chemistry, not a wound that requires a trained outside professional. The governing body, the 8 men in Warwick, New York who decide every doctrine, has published, across decades of Watchtower magazines and Awake issues, the same recurring framework. Anxiety, depression, suicidal ideation, intrusive thoughts. These are characterized as Satan's wedge, the wedge that opens when your spirituality is not strong enough to keep him out. The cure prescribed in those study articles we read aloud at Sunday Watchtower study, with our hands raised and our scripted answers ready, is more meeting attendance, more field service, more Bible study, more prayer, more submission. The cure is more system. A worldly therapist is, in their framework, the worst possible recourse. Worldly means contaminated. Worldly means a person who does not know Jehovah, does not understand headship, does not respect the organization, will encourage you to think for yourself, will ask you questions that loosen the grip of the truth. The Watchtower has, in print, called secular psychotherapy a doorway for apostate thinking. It has described the human heart as treacherous beyond recovery, and warned sisters that confiding in worldly counselors will introduce ideas that compete with theocratic guidance. The framing has not softened in 30 years. The 2020s broadcasts on jw.org broadcast did not soften it. It remains identical. The unstated rule is simple. An outside woman with a notepad and a graduate degree is more dangerous than the despair she is meant to treat. So what the elders said to me on my couch on that Tuesday night was the framework working exactly as designed. Brother Thompson did not invent the response. Brother Kessler did not invent it. They were faithfully reproducing the spiritual food of the proper time the governing body had given them. Their training, codified in the Shepherd the Flock of God manual that lived in my husband's nightstand drawer underneath his cycle log, instructs them to assess the spiritual condition first, the marriage submission second, and the medical or psychological dimension a distant third. Usually only when a sister threatens self-harm so explicitly that the elders begin to fear legal exposure for the congregation. And the doctrine of headship, that the husband is the spiritual head of the wife and she must submit to him in all things short of clear sin, meant that the cure for my depression was, in their reading of 1 Peter 3, more obedience to Daniel, not less. The man who was logging my menstrual cycle in a blue notebook was prescribed to me by the elders sitting on my couch as my therapist. My head, my spiritual physician. The sentence I will never forget came from Brother Kessler. He said in that quiet voice, "Sister Hoffman, sometimes a wife who is struggling with sadness has not yet learned to fully relax into her husband's leadership." He said it the way you say a recipe, like it was an ingredient I had been forgetting. Let me step out of the explanation for a minute. There are parts of this story I cannot say on this channel. The platform will not let me. The blue notebook in full, the sentences from that living room word for word, those live somewhere else. So I wrote it down. 3 notebooks, 3 years, 208 pages, the unedited record. It is called the Mansfield Pages, and the link is in the first comment. If it is not your moment, that is all right too. Back to the story. The week after the elders sat in our living room, Daniel doubled my personal study schedule. Not by suggestion, by calendar. He wrote it on the kitchen wall calendar I stared at every morning while I waited for my coffee to drip. Additional watchtower preparation, extra Bible reading, family worship doubled, Saturday double field service, Sunday double watchtower study at home before the meeting. He told me the elders had recommended this. He said it would heal me. It did not heal me. It made me a kind of tired I did not know was possible. I started losing weight. I stopped getting my period, which Daniel noticed because of the blue notebook, and which became a separate concern he raised with the elders, because the absence of the cycle in his log meant the absence of intimacy in our bed, and the absence of intimacy in our bed was a headship failure. Mine, presumably. I could not name a single thing I wanted anymore. My handwriting got smaller and smaller in my meeting notebook until my own scriptural notes were the size of grains of rice on the page. That winter, when I was supposed to be in service, I told Daniel I had stomach flu and drove myself to the Mansfield Public Library instead. I sat at a wood veneer carrel in the reference section and I typed, for the first time in my life, the words depression and Jehovah's Witnesses into a public computer. I read for 90 minutes. I went home. I served Daniel his portion. I wrote in my own private notebook that night, under the covers with a flashlight, the sentence, "I am drowning in my field service skirt." That was almost 2 years before the Judicial Committee. 2 more years of meetings, of submission, of marital recalibration. The depression did not lift once. It deepened until it was the only weather I could remember. The crack came at the bakery in the summer of 2024. The worldly coworker, Megan, 34, divorced, single mother, the woman I had been raised to fear my entire life. I worked part-time in the back of a small Mansfield bakery. That afternoon, I was rotating sourdough boules by hand on the stainless prep tray because the cooling rack had broken. Flour on my forearms, the tray warm against my apron. Megan was wrapping pastries on the other side of the counter, and I had mentioned, half apologetically, that I could not attend a coworker's birthday party that weekend. She did not press. She did not judge. She just said, "That sounds really lonely. Do you ever get to choose anything just because it makes you happy?" I did not answer her. I rotated 3 more boules. I stared at the flour line on my left wrist where the apron had ridden up. And underneath that question, something the elders had been trying to seal for 2 years, cracked open like dropped pottery. That night, after Daniel fell asleep, I went down to the locked downstairs bathroom with the household laptop, lowered the screen brightness so it would not show under the door, and I read about the Australian Royal Commission until almost 3 in the morning. The two-witness rule. The men who had decided that an abused child needed 2 corroborating eyewitnesses before the elders could act. I sat on the closed toilet lid with the laptop on my thighs, and I understood that it was not me. It had never been me. The depression was not a spiritual deficiency. It was a sane response to an insane environment. The cure they had prescribed, more system, was the disease. After I closed the laptop, I went back upstairs. I passed the nightstand drawer where the blue notebook still lived. I went back to bed beside the man who was logging me, and I lay very still on my left side, and I did the thing I had not done in 8 years of marriage. I made a plan. Not a dramatic plan, a small one. I decided I would start setting aside $20 from each bakery paycheck, in cash, in a tampon box at the bottom of my work bag. I decided I would, the next time I went to the library, look up the address of the nearest secular women's shelter. Not to go there, just to know where it was. I decided I would no longer be a Q in anybody's column. I am 26. I have been out of the organization 4 months. I see a secular, trauma-informed therapist twice a week. Her office has a green plant in the corner that is real, not silk, and a box of Kleenex that is for me, not for the elders. I have been in therapy 2 months. I cried for the first 6 sessions, for almost the entire 50 minutes each time. And she did not flinch, and she did not quote Proverbs 3 at me, and she did not tell me my sadness was a spiritual deficiency. She told me my sadness was data. She told me it had been telling me the truth for years. I read a lot now. Not Watchtower magazines, not Awake issues. Real books, secular books, books with footnotes and indexes. I am working through trauma memoirs and post-cult recovery literature, and one of the books has a chapter on coercive control that made me sit on the floor of my living room and laugh out loud, because it described Daniel's blue notebook in clinical language as a known pattern. He had not invented it. He had been instructed in it by a culture older than he was. He was a fellow captive. I want to say that clearly because I have said it before and I will keep saying it. Daniel was a fellow captive. He could not see the cage either. The cage was built before either of us was born. My mother has not called me in 4 months. The last conversation we had was in mid-December, 3 days after the announcement at the midweek meeting. She said, in the tone of voice she used to read from the New World Translation at family worship, that until I returned to Jehovah, I was not her daughter. Then she hung up. My brother Michael, who was appointed elder 6 months after my disfellowshipping, has not spoken to me in 7 months. My niece Lily, who is 4, and my nephew Caleb, who is 2, they will not know me. Not the way I would have wanted them to. I have made what peace I can with that. It is the kind of peace that does not stop hurting. It just stops controlling you. Megan calls me about once a month. She drives up from Mansfield sometimes. Last month, she brought me a loaf of sourdough from the bakery, still warm, wrapped in brown paper. She has a daughter who is 11, who drew me a picture of a cat once that I have stuck on my refrigerator. Daniel said drawings on a refrigerator were vanity, a worldly clutter. The drawing of the cat is the most important thing in my apartment. I cut my hair to my shoulders the second week I lived in Columbus. Daniel had not let me cut it past my shoulder blades for 8 years. I went to a salon and a woman named Brenda fixed it for $40 and asked me whether I wanted bangs. I said yes. I had not been allowed to have bangs since I was 12. I cried in the chair. Brenda gave me a tissue and did not ask me what was wrong. She said, "A lot of women cry the first time they cut their hair after something. I tipped her $30. I went home and I made myself dinner at 7:15, not 6:23, 7:15, because I wanted to. I still have the blue notebook. I took it from the nightstand drawer the morning I left Daniel for the last time. It lives in the bottom of a cardboard box in the back of my closet now, with the pink hardcover copy of The Secret of Family Happiness my mother slipped onto my wedding morning bathroom counter 8 years ago. Both books are in that box. I do not look at them. I do not throw them away. They are evidence. Someday they may be more than evidence. They may be a piece of corroborating proof that what happened to me was happening in nightstand drawers all over the world. If you grew up in a house where your sadness was treated as a sin, and your silence was treated as your virtue, and the men who claimed to be your shepherds prescribed more obedience as the cure for the wound their obedience had made, I see you. If you are a woman today, at 50 or 60 or 70, who spent your 40s on antidepressants you were told were a worldly weakness, who sat through watchtower studies with the answers underlined in your magazine and a quiet drowning behind your sternum, who never once heard the word therapist spoken in your living room. I see you. If you are a woman right now, watching this on a second phone in the bathroom at midnight while your husband sleeps, and the words I have just said have moved something inside you that has been sealed for a very long time, I see you. The depression was never a spiritual deficiency. It was a sane response to an environment that was making you smaller every year. There are doctors. There are therapists. There is a whole world of women who have walked out of rooms like that one and found the air on the other side breathable. If you stayed with me all the way through this one, thank you. The rest of it is in the first comment, if anything in this story reached you tonight. Freedom hurts less than obedience. I promise you that.